Hey everybody, Ryan here at Etrailer. Today on our 2016 Thor Tuscany XTE Motorhome, we're going to be showing you how to install the Air Force One supplemental braking system for the motorhome side only. But before we get into that, let's take a minute, check this out and make sure it's what you're looking for. With this particular kit, there's primarily one big reason why people use it. And that is because, say if you have already been flat towing a vehicle for a while and you had everything set up as far as the braking system goes, being that it's the Air Force One. And what tends to happen, a lot of people, they flat tow for a couple years and then end up getting into a different motorhome, right? You trade the older one in, get into a newer one. Well, instead of having to change up your whole braking system on the vehicle that you're flat towing and things like that, you can simply just pick up the motorhome side only parts, install all those on the coach, and be able to quickly and easily kind of get back on the road again. Something I do want to mention, the motorhome side only kit does not come included with the air hose that goes from the back of your coach to the front of your towed vehicle. My thought is, with this being the motorhome side only, they probably assume that you already have, the vehicle side installed and everything, and that you probably already have one of these. For whatever reason, if you don't have one, you can always pick it up separately here at Etrailer, or even if you want an extra, feel free to grab one. And one of the really nice things about the Demco Air Force One braking system is how versatile it is. So not only can you get just the motorhome side, there's also second vehicle kits available too. So let's say if you end up, trading your vehicle in, you don't feel like taking the system out, you can always get the second vehicle kit, pop it in your new car, or if you want to flat tow two cars, you can get that second vehicle kit installed on your other car and be able to hook them up at will and everything work with your motorhome, or you can get the whole package. So whatever scenario you find yourself in, chances are really good that there's going to be a solution for you out there. As far as the installation of this goes, it's really not too bad. I'll be honest with you, it's never a ton of fun crawling underneath a motorhome. Generally speaking, they're dirty and don't have a ton of room to work and everything, but the concept of it is pretty straightforward, and it's something you only have to do once. If you feel comfortable doing something like that, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. The first thing that you're going to want to do is mount up your tank. And on this motorhome, it worked out really well. There's actually, where this valve is bolted up to this cross member here, the bracket on her tank actually lined up perfect with it. So I just used that factory hardware. There's 1/2-inch nuts and bolts that you can remove that was originally holding the valve up. Put our tank in place, put the valve back in place, and tighten the hardware back down. Now we can identify what lines we're going to need to tee into with the air line. So you're going to have this large green air line. It's one of the bigger diameter ones, if not the biggest, and it's about 1 foot behind our tank that we mounted. And that's going to be our supply line, and that's going to have constant air pressure to it. And before you cut and tee into this, you're going to want to make sure to drain your air tanks. So you can just hit the brakes a bunch with the motorhome off until that pressure goes to zero to accomplish that. And whenever you get this sorted, you want to make sure that this line is really clean. So you can use some rubbing alcohol or some type of cleaner, soap, whatever, and a paper towel to get all that debris and paint and undercoating and road grime off of that. That way when we tee into it, it won't leak. And then about 1 foot below the supply line, we can identify our metered air. And that line, essentially, it's this one here. It's this black one. It's usually smaller in diameter, and it usually just runs from your metering valve to the other air valve. So it kind of just loops around. And this one, when we tee into, you want to make sure it's clean and everything as well. But this one's only going to have air pressure push through it whenever you apply the brakes in the coach. So that's one way you can identify it. So we are going to have two quick connect fittings here for our airlines, and that's how we're going to tee into them. So the larger one, that's going to be for the big supply line or the green line. And then the smaller one, that's going to be for our metered air connection, which was that black line kind of right underneath of our supply line. So with it being so tight up there, I just have a couple of pieces of line. That way I can show you how to cut everything and effectively demonstrate how these actually get teed into those airlines. So what you'd want to do, so this is a metered air. You're going to want to cut that metered air line on the coach in half. And these are just going to plug. You're literally just going to tee this right into it. And when you make these connections, all right, you don't want to just cut it with a regular old pair of snips. You want to use some snips like this, or a tubing cutter tool, or a razor edge. You want a good, clean, straight cut that don't have burrs or kinks or anything like that on it. And so, say if this was metered air, plugged in, you'll feel them kind of snap into place, and you should be able to pull out on them. You'll get a little movement, but they shouldn't actually come out, And I guess since we're right here too, eventually once we get all this together, you want to check for leaks. If you're getting a leak out of this fitting, the way you would disconnect it, you'd push kind of down on that ring and pull out on the line. That's how they come apart. So, if you end up with a leak, once you get it all together, chances are good you'll have to pull it apart and recut that line, plug it back in, and check it again. So those tee into there. The larger one's going to work the same way. And then you'll have some smaller 1/4-inch line that'll run to our air tank and whatnot that will plug into the top of that fitting. So back underneath the motorhome, I was able to get our fittings teed in, just like we talked about. And this is how it turned out. Now with that said, if you remember, on the top of our tee, we had that smaller 1/4-inch line that comes out of it. And, when you go to plug these in, cut yourself about 2 foot of 1/4-inch line, plug it into the top. And those are actually going to run to the fittings on our air tank. So on our tank, there's 3 fittings. This one over here, where it's just a single fitting, that's where you're going to plug your supply line into. So from the big green hose goes into there. Now on the other end of the tank, you're going to have 2 fittings. All right, and this fitting, that's where you're going to plug the line coming from your metered air connection into. So that plugs right in there. Then you can take the rest of the air line that you get in the kit and plug it into this last remaining fitting. And this is going to run all the way to the back of your motorhome where our air valve is going to be mounted up to actually hook up to our vehicle. So I routed that back. Again, under here, it's really tricky to see. 99% of the time, you want to follow your frame rail. There's usually factory air lines and wiring and stuff that run along through there. So you can just push it through there to the back. Whatever you do though, or whatever path you take, you want to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts and try not to get any kinks or anything along those lines into this airline. So here at the very back, this is where we have our fitting mounted, and it's this style of one here. And I've never had an issue pre-drilling into the fiberglass. It's really thick, and using the nuts and bolts that they give you to actually mount this thing up. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, I get it. You can always get a no drill bracket and attach it to your hitch and mount this up to it, but whatever you want to do. My suggestion, or something that I do as well, is I figure out what side of our vehicle the fitting is on and put this on the same side. That way I have a good clean straight shot to it. But really nothing to this, mount it up. You'll have your 1/4-inch air line that we got coming from the tank, and that just plugs right into the fitting on the back of this. So that's really about it as far as getting, the motorhome parts installed. Something I definitely suggest doing is starting the coach up, letting it build full air pressure, running through the brake cycles a couple times, just kind of get everything moving again and check for leaks. And usually they're pretty obvious. If you got one, you can usually hear it, but not a bad idea either to get underneath there wherever you made connections, take some soapy water in a spray bottle, spray it down, and see if you see bubbles forming rapidly, you know you got a leak. If you do, you can do what we talked about, recut them lines. But if everything's sealed up, you should be in pretty good shape. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Demco Air Force One supplemental braking system for the motorhome side only on our 2016 Thor Tuscany XTE Motorhome.